Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to the NHL Wraparound Podcast Summer Coolers presented by Lugaroo. In 2024, we did this for the first time, Neil, and I think based on how well it was received, we decided to go for another round.
Yeah, no, and it's a lot of fun to do, and I'll tell you what, when we're done doing this, you'll know exactly what to expect out of these teams this season. Maybe not where they're going to end or where they're going to finish in the standings or who's going to score how many goals, but you'll at least know the additions and subtractions and be able to form your own opinion.
So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go through all 32 teams over the course of 4 shows. After the Atlantic Division, which we're doing today, we'll be following up by the Metro, which will drop on Friday, the 22nd. The Central drops Monday, August 25th. And then we'll wrap up with the Pacific on Wednesday, August 27th. So the objective here, as Neil said, is not to predict, but it's to look at each club based on the movement during the course of the summer and assess, based on their personnel moves, whether they're closer or further, in our opinion, from their next level of advancement. We're going to give you some stats from last year. We'll talk about the adds and the drops and the re-signs, and then we'll get into discussion. Now, last year, we had actually started with the Florida Panthers because they finished in first place, and we just worked our way downwards. But they finished third this year, but we're still going to start with them because they won the Stanley Cup for consecutive years, Neil.
And we didn't think we'd see that after seeing Tampa do it in the bubble series where we were all suffering through the COVID era. Tampa won it twice in a row, and you weren't sure you'd see that again because of the parity in the league. But Florida was a deserving 2-time champion for sure.
So here we go. The Florida Panthers. And considering that we thought maybe we'd never see Paul Maurice win a Stanley Cup after his long career, he's going for history, and General Manager Bill Zito is certainly giving him the tools to do that because he pulled off the trifecta, re-signing Sam Bennett as a UFA, 8 years, $8 million AAV, coming off a Conn Smythe Trophy, winning playoff. Brad Marchand stays on 6 years, 5.25, and he also manages to keep Aaron Ekblad 8 years, $6.1 million. He did have to let a few players go. Nate Schmidt signed with Utah. Nico Sturm signed with Minnesota. Vitek Vanacek, the backup goaltender, also signed with Utah. But all in all, Zito has positioned Maurice to give this club the best opportunity to make a run again.
No, he sure has. And they didn't lose as many integral pieces this year as they lost last year in the summer of 24. You were talking about Ekman Larson leaving, Montour left, others left. And this year, they really aren't huge pieces. I really like Nate Schmidt, and I think that's a great signing by Utah. I thought he was really good for Florida. But all in all, Bill Zito has become a magician. And so for the people who thought that the assistant manager of Columbus, what would he know to go to Florida and be the GM? What did he learn in Columbus, a place that never makes the playoffs and are terrible? How are they going to be any? Well, Bill Zito has certainly fooled everyone. The ex-hockey player agent has done just a remarkable job. Even though Jim Nill has won General Manager of the Year, the Jim Gregory Award, Bill Zito, I don't know where he hides his gun because he's robbing things left and right. But him and Paul Maurice make a great tandem. They seem to be like no controversy ever coming out of the Panthers. They seem to be on the same page all the time. And we'll see. This is going to be a very interesting year. Personally, I'm going to be pulling for Florida because I'd like to see it. I'd like to see 3 times.
And a couple of other subtle moves in there, because we mentioned that Schmidt and Vanacek are now off to Utah, but in their places, Daniel Tarasov traded for with Columbus, signed as a UFA on July 1st, and Jeff Petrie comes over from Detroit as a UFA. So I think, as we saw perhaps with Julian Brisebois in Tampa before, it's not so much the top-end guys, it's how you fill your back end in that really determines what kind of run you're going to be able to make.
Absolutely, because obviously you've got to keep the big boys, and Zito did that. He kept all the big boys, but it's those guys that are going to be on the ice when your big guys are resting on the bench trying to get their breath back. You can't have a deficit at that time. You've got to have as equal or better than the other club is putting on the ice. So Zito seems to be able to be masterful at doing this. And I haven't looked it up, Vic, but I wonder now that you say it, was Zito there when Tarasov was acquired by Columbus? Does he know Tarasov because of his background in Columbus? I'm not sure because I don't have it in front of me, the reference material, but there's quite often there's a string to who these general managers pick up.
And you would certainly know that, wouldn't you?
A little bit. Yeah. Adam Graves and on and on.
Yeah. So a couple of other re-signs. Thomas Nosek re-signs as a UFA with the Panthers for 1 year at the minimum, $775K. And Mackie Samoskevich re-signs. That happened on July 10th. And the reason that that's significant is his day with the Stanley Cup happened recently. And he went to Sandy Hook Elementary School earlier in life. And he returned there with the Stanley Cup to the memorial site where in 2012, 20 students and 6 teachers and administrators were murdered. And he also brought the cup back to his youth rink. And I wanted to give a shout out for that because that's just really special to bring the cup back there and give that town something to really celebrate amidst the tragedy that took place 13 years ago.
Another little side note to Mackie Samoskevich. Do you remember when I went down and visited with Paul and Maurice when they were at UBS Arena playing the Islanders before the game? He mentioned to me, he says, take a look at Mackie Samoskevich tonight. He says, this kid just works as hard. You can't believe the work ethic this kid has. And he said that Sam Bennett took him under his wing. And the kid is playing really well. And I never forgot that. He was so enthusiastic about Samoskevich, but I didn't know the Sandy Hook piece, but it is heartwarming that he would do that.
One other thing heading into the season before we get into the prowling question that I'm going to present to you. Matt Tkachuk now debating whether or not to have surgery. That's that lingering injury that he has had going back to the Four Nations face-off. Are you surprised that he's waited this long? But even if he gets the surgery, you have to figure that the Panthers are going to be able to survive. And if he comes back strong for the second half of the season, then it would have been worth the wait.
I'm not really surprised that he's waited this long because I don't know what is involved in it. I can only tell you this, that I had total knee replacement a number of years ago, and I tried for 4 or 5 years before that to exercise my way out of having that surgery. So I can only imagine that when you're an NHL player, you don't want to miss any time. So you try to work as hard as you can to rehab yourself and not have to get surgery. And then finally, when you can't get it done, you got to bite the bullet and say, okay, I'll take the surgery. So I'm sure he tried as hard as he could to avoid surgery, but if he's got to have it, he's got to have it.
Well, that's going to lead us into the big question about the Panthers as they look to become the 6th team for a three-peat or an official dynasty, as it is referred to, a minimum of 3 consecutive Stanley Cup wins. It's been done before by the 47 through 49 Maple Leafs, the 56 through 60 Montreal Canadiens. The Leafs did it again from 62 to 64. Canadiens again, 76 through 79, and the New York Islanders from 1980 through 1983. But the last four teams that have had the opportunity for the three-peat, the 93 Penguins, 99 Red Wings, 2018 Penguins, and 2022 Lightning fell up short. So, Neil, for you, where is the line in the sand that will determine whether or not the Panthers succeed in making history?
I think there's two things that I look at, and that is Bobrovsky, who's obviously one of their elder statesmen on the team. Can he still keep playing the way he's played as his age keeps advancing? Can he still keep as sharp as he's been? And the second thing is simply health. Can they stay healthy? They hit this year's playoffs pretty healthy. And you know, remember, that's what we just talked about with Matt Tkachuk. They found a way to keep him out of the lineup until the playoffs started, and then all of a sudden he was healthy again. Can the Panthers stay healthy enough to do what they need to do? And I don't think you can say that, well, you can end anywhere in the regular season and just as long as you're healthy in the playoffs. I don't believe that. I think you have to go in feeling it. You don't have to win every game for the last 10 games of the season, but you have to go in feeling good about yourselves. So that's my answer, Vic, is Bobrovsky, and can they stay healthy?
The Toronto Maple Leafs, last year finishing in first place, 52-26-4 for 108 points. They defeated Ottawa in the opening round before falling to the Panthers in 7 games, and really came up with a couple of lemons in games 5 and 7. It was their 9th consecutive playoff appearance, but they've only won 2 series since 2004. And the biggest news coming out of Toronto during the offseason is trading 9-year veteran Mitch Marner to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for center Nick Waugh. Marner went on and signed for 8 years, $12 million a year, full no movement clause in that deal. And here's a guy that reached 100 points for the first time in the 2024-25 season, has averaged 82.3 points per season in his 9 years in Toronto. And of course, the big question here is, where is that going to be made up?
I don't think it is going to get made up. I think they're going to have to do it by committee. They're going to all have to chip in a little bit more. But I do think, and I've said this before, that he's a franchise player. He wasn't coming back to Toronto. That was established early in the season. He had all the control over the situation. And I think that Brad Treliving, the general manager of the Leafs, did the best he could. When they changed GMs from Dubas to Treliving, there was a little bit of a gap there, and that's where Marner's contract didn't get addressed, and Marner had total control after that. And so he didn't want to go back to Toronto. He didn't want to stay in his hometown for whatever his own personal reasons are, that he didn't feel good about playing with the Maple Leafs, and he was going to leave. So obviously, you know, they were able to get a deal put together between the Knights and the Leafs, but Mitch Marner wasn't coming back to Toronto.
So in addition to acquiring Watt in this deal, they get several bottom 6 forwards to insert into the lineup. Matias Michelli in a trade with Utah. Michael Pezzetta signs as a UFA from Montreal. Travis Boyd coming in as a UFA from Minnesota. Vinny Lettieri as a UFA from Boston. And one move that I really did like was acquiring Dakota Joshua in a trade with the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for a 2028 4th-round pick. Joshua came back last year, had a battle with testicular cancer, and I think this is maybe a little bit of a hidden gem that Treliving has acquired.
Yeah, I don't understand this. And there's a lot of things, and we'll get to Vancouver when we do the Pacific Division, but there's a lot of things I don't understand about Vancouver Canucks and what they're doing. And this is one of them. I think that was a good move by Treliving. From what I've seen of Joshua, he's a good, huge guy, Dakota Joshua, and can add and probably play the style of game that Berube wants his teams to play. So I think it's a good pickup by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and wait to see when we do Vancouver's show how they're going to fill in for all these missing pieces.
The re-signs on the Maple Leafs. John Tavares, who was making $11 million before, takes a real hometown discount this time, re-signing as a UFA, 4 years, 4.389 AAV. Had 38 goals last season as a 34-year-old. He'll be 35 before the start of the 25-26 season. Steven Lorentz re-signs as a UFA. Nick Robertson manages to avoid arbitration 1 year, 1.825. But the big one here, Matthew Knies, 6 years, 7.75 AAV. And if you're replacing a member of the Beatles, then Knies is now the new member of the core four, joining Tavares, Auston Matthews, and William Nylander.
Yeah, and I really, who doesn't like Knies? He's a power forward in today's game. He's this big guy, strong guy, good skill level. Great signing by the Leafs to tie him up. I'm not sure that the numbers I don't know what numbers make sense anymore, but they certainly got him tied up. And you never know, maybe Knies, with his improvement this coming season, because he's in an improvement cycle in his career right now. Maybe with his improvement, he can slip in and make up for Marner. He's not going to make 100 points, but he can make up for that, as you said, and become one of the core four on the Leafs. While we're at it, I just want to mention that John Tavares, I'm so impressed with the way he played this season and the way he played in the playoffs. For a guy who had his C taken off of his jersey and given over to Auston Matthews, he was such a team guy in the way that he handled that, and that the way he played all season long and then into the playoffs. I can't say enough about him from my standpoint. I don't know him, but I sure respect the way he handled the whole situation this year in Toronto.
And he will now have that opportunity to have Knies alongside with him in a more prominent role. Knies, as we mentioned, 29 goals last year, 29 assists for 58 points. In addition to Marner, a couple of notable drops. Ryan Reeves goes to San Jose in a trade in exchange for defenseman Thrun. And Pontus Holmberg, who I thought was a rather serviceable forward as a right wing, on a bottom six role, signed as a UFA in Tampa after not receiving a qualifying offer. So that brings us to the budding question about the Maple Leafs. Creative director Neil Smith came up with all of these little quirky things. As you know, the Maple Leafs are known as the Buds. And the question here, Neil, the Toronto Maple Leafs have gone through 58 years and 57 seasons since their last Stanley Cup, or even their last Stanley Cup final appearance. My opinion is, unless two of the four core four players that we've just mentioned have sustainable runs deep into the playoffs, you and I are going to be having this exact same discussion a year from now.
I agree. And I think we're going to have the same discussion a year from now, because I just don't see them as a hard team to play in the playoffs. Now, maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe Craig Berube will get them to tweak them enough to get them to change to be able to play that Florida Panthers style game, which, by the way, is the same game that every Stanley Cup team ends up playing in the playoffs. They grind it out and they get gritty and dirty and nasty and end up with the cup. And Toronto's going to have to do the same thing. So I do think we'll have the same discussion next summer or next August when we do this all over again. But we'll see where Toronto can get to. There's certainly an enigma. This team is, as you once said, they suck more oxygen out of a room than any team in the league.
And even the comments that Auston Matthews made about needing more guys to step up. I mean, if anybody needs to step up, all he has to do is take a look in the mirror.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Toronto, as a city, is going to start to get on Auston Matthews pretty good if he doesn't start to step up. It's one thing, we all know he's a tremendous regular season player. He's already a Hall of Famer. Let's not kid ourselves. But in order for him to really be recognized as a true superstar in every way of saying it, he's going to have to produce in the playoffs. That's what the big boys do.
The Tampa Bay Lightning. And this is John Cooper's 14th season behind the Lightning bench. Last season, finished second in the Atlantic with 102 points. Third in the East, 7th overall in the entire NHL, but they do lose to Florida, 5 games in the opening round. And they've got out in the first round each of the past 3 seasons since trying to make it a three-peat in the 2022 Stanley Cup Final. The Lightning did, however, finish first overall in offense in the league, 3.56 goals per game, despite losing longtime captain Steven Stamkos to free agency last year.
Yeah, and they didn't seem to miss a beat not having Steven Stamkos there. They ended up with Gensel sort of taking his place on the power play, and they were still really an offensive juggernaut to play against. But when the playoffs came, I think you said something earlier in the show that Zito was doing with the Panthers, filling in for those bottom players that are on the ice. It's one thing to have the Kucherovs and the Gensels and all these other stars that they have, and Vasilevsky in net, by the way. But you also have to have real good depth players, third line, fourth line players, second pair defense, third pair defense. And that's where I think Tampa fell a little bit short. Now, that's not to blame Julien Brisebois or John Cooper, because I think that they find themselves having to pay for that 21 and 22 Stanley Cup. The players got to get paid. And, you know, you can't pay these guys most of the cap and still have great depth players. And that's where I think Chicago, when they hit the salary cap era and they won their 3 Stanley Cups, not in a row, but they won 3 Stanley Cups, they found themselves starting to get depleted because they had to decide who to give the money to. Kane and Taves and Duncan Keith took all the money, and they didn't have enough to really put a lot of good players around them. So I think that Tampa Bay's in the same situation. They still have all stars on that team and plenty of stars and plenty of reasons to go see Tampa play whenever you can, because they're an exciting team. Where they can go in the playoffs, we'll have to wait and see.
Let's talk about their ads. They got Sam Riley in a trade with Edmonton for Isaac Howard, who was the 2025 Hobey Baker Award winner coming out of Michigan State. He's a prospect that is sound defensively, has some offensive upside. They also added, as you just mentioned before, coming over from Toronto as a UFA, Pontus Holmberg, a right wing, and Jacob Pelletier signed as a UFA after the Flyers, who they had acquired in a trade with Calgary, did not offer him a qualifying offer. So Tampa Bay scoops in, brings him on board, and these could be a couple of really solid bottom 6 signings that Brisebois has made here. They
could very well be. I think you already mentioned Holmberg was good with the Toronto Maple Leafs as a depth guy. And Pelletier, you know, he just got to Philadelphia last year from the Calgary Flames. So they could be 2 real good pickups that want an opportunity to prove that they're good. And now they're going to play with a star-studded Tampa Bay team and may be able to be even better.
The re-signs on this club, goaltender Jonas Johansson will be backing up Andre Vasilevsky, re-signs as a UFA. Yanni Gourde re-signs as well, 6 years, a little over $2 million a year. And Gage Gonsalves, who I thought was a very effective player at times last year, also stays on with the Lightning. They lose Isaac Howard, as we'd mentioned before, and defenseman Nick Perbix goes to Nashville as an unrestricted free agent. So as we head into the new year, we know that this team is formidable, particularly offensively, although their defense was actually pretty good as well. They were 4th in the league in goals against per game. But that offense is number 1. The power play, even without Stamkos, only dropped to 5th from 1st the year prior. There's Kucherov, there's Point. Brandon Hagel had a career year. Gensel had 41 goals, and Anthony Cirelli with 27 goals. So I think now the question is there enough snarl? Is there enough grit on this team? And I think you've mentioned it already. And I do want to point out also, one of the things that I thought really hurt them, which definitely flew under the radar during the playoffs, was Oliver Bjorkstrand, who was acquired around the deadline last year from Seattle. And he suffered an injury against Detroit on the 11th of April. It was a compartment syndrome injury where you get swelling and internal bleeding, and he wound up missing the entire playoffs. Would he have made the difference against Florida? Probably not, but this is certainly a guy that, as expected, is going to be healthy this year and able to return. And I think this is going to be a good addition for them over the course of a full season.
Well, and we talked about it before. They need more depth guys. They need the depth guys there to support the people that you just mentioned, the Points and the Sorellis and Kucherovs and Gensels. And, you know, you can go on. There's 5 or 6 great players on this team. So, yes, I think that getting him back will be a good thing for Tampa.
The Ottawa Senators, they make the playoffs last season for the first time since 2017. They go out to the Maple Leafs in the opening round, actually put a scare into the Leafs after going down 3-0. They won the next 2 before falling in Game 6. And not a lot in terms of high-end players coming into their lineup. They did get defenseman Spence in a trade with the LA Kings. They also signed as UFAs Lars Eller from Washington, Arthur Kaliev, who did not receive a qualifying offer from the New York Rangers, and Hunter Shepard, goaltender who comes in from Washington. Remember that guy had the big bushy hair?
Yeah.
Kind of looked like the lead guitarist from Toto. So those are all additions. In terms of players that they signed or re-signed, Nicholas Matinpalo, 2 years, under $1 million a year. And I thought maybe he was going to be worth a little bit more than that because he was a surprise player suiting up for Finland during the Four Nations tournament. They also managed to re-up Tyler Clevin, defenseman, for 2 years at $1.5 million plus. Fabian Zetterlund stays on left wing. And Claude Giroux re-signs 1 year, $2 million with potential of $2.75 million in bonuses. And I think Giroux really wanted to finish his career there, likes the direction that the club is going in. They also managed to hold on to Levi Merilainen, who, when Linus Ullmark was hurt last year, did a very commendable job in goal for the Senators. They also re-signed Nick Cousins and right wing Hayden Hodgson. And quickly, the notable drops for the Senators: backup goaltender Anton Forsberg signs as a UFA with the Kings, and Adam Gaudette, who scored rather impressively, particularly at the start of the season, he signed as a UFA by the San Jose Sharks, and defenseman Travis Hamonic signs with the Detroit Red Wings. So as we enter our capital question about the Senators, they grew a lot last year. Their changes have been made primarily on the fringes. We saw Jake Sanderson emerge as a top-end defenseman. Certainly the commitment in goal by Linus Ullmark, wanting to go to the Senators long-term. But an area of concern that I have, no 30 goal scorers last season. Brady Tkachuk at 29, Drake Batherson at 26, Tim Stutzla 24 to go along with 55 assists. So you can see the growth here. But if this team is short on goal scoring, where is Steve Staios going to find it if this club is to get into the playoffs for a second straight season?
Well, it's a legitimate concern. I want to add to that Travis Green did a great job in his rookie season. He's not a rookie in the NHL, but his first season as head coach of the Ottawa Senators, a marvelous job getting that team into the playoffs. How will he be in year 2? Will the message still be the same? Will he still be able to get them to play by committee? Because as you said, they don't have those big scorers. So where are all the goals going to come from? Well, they're going to have to come, as I just use that term, by committee. So everybody's going to have to chip in and get a little bit above what they normally do. They certainly play like their captain, don't they? Another Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk this time, and he plays that nasty, tough, hard game. And I think that's starting to define the Ottawa Senators. They play a very hard game, and I was really happy for them that they finally got back into the playoffs. They were the one team that broke the glass ceiling, if you want to call it that, and got from that group down below into the group up above thanks to the terrible year that some teams had that were in the playoffs the year before, i.e. Rangers. So that's a good capital question about the Senators. Will they have enough scoring next year? We'll have to wait and see what Mr. Green, the head coach, does.
That'll wrap up the top four from 2024-25 in the Atlantic Division. We will continue on with Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, and Boston after word from Lugaroo. There's a brand born in hockey locker rooms that now outfits the majority of pro sports teams across North America. It's called Lugaroo. Lugaroo makes performance apparel for every moment of an athlete's day. The early lift, the morning skate, the flight to the next city, or dinner after a win. Quiet, technical, built to last, no noise, no ego. If you're the guy who shows up early, stays late, and doesn't need applause, this is your uniform. The cut is sharp, the details deliberate, and the gear holds its shape when the day gets heavy. Hockey players choose it because it supports the work between shifts, the hours that actually decide the game. Check out Lugaroo at lugaroo.co. That's LOOGAROO.co. And use the promo code Wraparound and you'll get free shipping. More than ready, Lugaroo.
Vic, we got to give a big shout out to Colin Mulvey, who's the founder of Lugaroo clothing company. He's been such a supporter of ours with NHL Wraparound and gave us these really nice shirts. Has great quality stuff and is an ex pro hockey player. So it's great to have him on board as part of this series of the summer coolers. And we hope you'll all go to his website and take a look at the clothing line that he has. A lot of NHL players are wearing his clothing, and you can too. So that's Lugaroo, but .co, not .com, .co.
Continuing on with our Atlantic Division summer cooler, the Montreal Canadiens. And you'd mentioned a little while before, Neil, when we were talking about Ottawa breaking the glass ceiling into the top four, the Canadiens didn't crack the top four, but they did manage to make the playoffs. Their first appearance in the postseason since making the 2021 Stanley Cup final. That was the back end of the COVID era where they fell to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They get into the playoffs, lost to Washington in 5 games, but I thought what we saw from the Canadiens last year and the energy of that franchise being rejuvenated and making that push towards the playoffs was, I think, heartening for any hockey fan out there that loves the tradition and the history of the Montreal Canadiens.
If you love the original 6, and i.e., take a look right here, the original 6, there it is. If you love the original 6, it was great to see the Montreal Canadiens back in the playoffs. You can't get any more rabid fans than you're going to find in La Belle Province supporting the Habs. And it was really good to see them get back into the playoff picture.
The biggest news that the Canadiens made, perhaps, was a trade with the New York Islanders acquiring Noah Dobson in exchange for Emil Heineman and the 16th and 17th picks in the 2025 draft. Dobson turned around, signed 8 years, $9.5 million AAV. And I think when you and I saw this deal, it certainly raised our eyebrows. I don't see Dobson as a player in that financial stature, but as Elliot Friedman had told us, you're worth what somebody's willing to pay you. But you saw this player over the course of several seasons at UBS Arena, and I think we're in agreement here that this is a little bit of an eye-opener for the price that they wound up paying.
I find it stunning that they would, think that this is a franchise defenseman, because if you're paying him 9.5, he better be a franchise player for you. And does a franchise player last year in 71 games, and he's an offensive player, he's a minus 16 and 39 points in 71 games. The year before, 79 games, he had 70 points. Okay, that's a good year. The year before that, he had 78 games. He had 49 points. The year before, 51. I just don't see him at this level that the Montreal Canadiens must see him at. And boy, oh boy, how far is $9.5 million going to go in Canada? I mean, that's like making 12 or 13 Canadian.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't even hear you talk about his defensive side of the game, which left a little bit to be desired also.
No, it leaves a lot to be desired, and it often does, though, with power play, offensively skilled defensemen. I can tell you one thing on a positive. Noah Dobson has a shot that's a rocket. He can shoot from the point. He can score from the point. But he is defensively a liability at times, and he's not Dennis Potvin. I mean, just to draw an analogy to another Islander. So we'll see. We'll see what Marty St. Louis can get out of him in Montreal. And am I wrong? And is he better? And is he even better getting away from the Islanders? The Islanders had some pretty good players, but we'll get to them when we get to the Metro Division.
Let's flip this positive, though, because whether they're on the same power play unit or head coach Marty St. Louis decides to split them up and have them play on different units. Left-handed shot, Lane Hudson. Right-handed shot, Noah Dobson. That's a pretty formidable backline on a power play if they wind up playing together on a first unit.
Oh, it is. There's no doubt about it. And they probably will play together on that first unit. I would think that they'd put everything that they had out there, at least to try them. And I don't see why they wouldn't work out. Like you said, one's a left, one's a right. Seems to be perfect. And so we'll see. I mean, Dobson, there's no doubt he's a power play player. He can shoot the puck like a rocket, but he can fall asleep on you as well.
You have to think that power play is going to step up in the league rankings this year. They were 21st in 2024-25. So let's hit the ads. In addition to Dobson, they get Zach Baldock in a trade with St. Louis in exchange for defenseman Logan Mailloux. Capo Kakinen signs as a UFA from Florida. He actually never played with the Panthers, so he'll probably be third-line goaltender. Sammy Blais signs as a UFA, didn't play at all last season in the NHL, did play for Abbotsford in the American Hockey League. That's the Canucks affiliate that won the Calder Cup. And also Joe Veleno signs as a UFA. He had been traded by Chicago to Seattle, released by the Kraken, and signed by the Canadiens. And on the RFA re-signings, goaltender Jakub Dobish, who did a commendable job last season, and defenseman Jaden Struble. The notable drops, Caden Primo, who was pretty much third-line goaltender. He gets traded to Carolina. Yoel Armia signed as a UFA by the Kings. Christian Dvorak signed as a UFA by the Flyers. Michael Pezzetta, as we mentioned earlier, signed as a UFA by Toronto. Raphael Harvey-Pinard signed by the Penguins. And Alex Barré-Boulet signed as a UFA by Colorado. So we've got a lot of hyphenated names in there. So now it comes time to the Bleu, Blanc et Rouge questions about the Canadiens. I love your work as creative director on the show, by the way.
Oh, boy. I love the silly little things like this.
So in addition to having the number 3 rated prospect pool in the NHL per The Athletic, and we start off with Ivan Demidov, who came over and made a pretty big splash in the immediate last year, and then as the playoff series went on against the Capitals, kind of disappeared a little bit, but nonetheless, I think Canadian fans excited about him. Jacob Fowler, David Reinbacher, Michael Hage, and Owen Beck, who's a possible top 6 forward going forward. You bring any of those players into the lineup with Nick Suzuki, who had a career year, 30 goals, 59 assists as their captain. Juraj Slafkovsky, I think, is becoming more and more of a physical and just a great power forward presence. He had 51 points last year. Cole Caulfield with 37 goals. You add on Lane Hudson, who comes off a Calder Trophy winning season. So you put all this into a cauldron here. And I still think this is a bubble team, but they're a dangerous bubble team.
They're a very dangerous bubble team. And if they can continue the improvement by some of the players that you just mentioned, they could find themselves back in the playoffs again. If some of the things don't work out that they're trying to do, they could find themselves regressing this season. For example, we mentioned Noah Dobson. They put a lot of stock in that move, that Noah Dobson. Can Lane Hudson do it again? Can he play just as well as a sophomore as he did as a freshman? They're going to have to continue improvement. It's not going to be easy again. It never is. But the New York Rangers are going to want to be back in the playoffs again. The Boston Bruins are going to want to be back in the playoffs again, just to name two. And so the field is going to get tighter. It's not going to get any easier for Montreal and for Ottawa, for that matter.
Just based on what we've spoken about with the Senators before, Canadiens now, and we're not into predictions, but based on the movement that you've seen by both of these clubs during the summer, to this point, who gets in? Ottawa, Montreal, neither, or both in 2026?
I would have to say that I think Montreal will have a real good shot at it, and I think Ottawa does too. I do, but you know that New York Rangers are not going to sit still. So there's one team out. And is there anybody before Ottawa that we talked about who might not make it? I don't see it, but I think that the better chance is probably going to be Montreal than Ottawa because of what you mentioned, the lack of goal scoring. But it's going to be really hard. Those wild card spots are going to be really, really tough this year.
The Detroit Red Wings, another team that is going to be beating at the door, as they have been for the past couple of seasons. They've missed the playoffs for 9 consecutive years. Their last series win was the opening round in 2013 against Anaheim. That's how far back we go. Offense, 22nd overall. Penalty killing, 32nd last, 70.1%. And they only had 2 shorthanded goals for, which was second fewest in the league. On the positive side, power play ranked 4th at 27%. Big move that they made during the course of the offseason, acquiring goaltender John Gibson in a trade with Anaheim in exchange for goaltender Peter Mrazek and draft picks in 2026 and 2027. They also signed James Van Riemsdyk as a UFA from Columbus. Mason Appleton, good bottom 6 forward, center, signed for 2 years, $2.9 million AAV from Winnipeg. And Travis Hamonic signs on 1 year, $1 million from the Ottawa Senators. So when we look at those players and you couple that with some of the signings that they have made, the re-signings of Albert Johansson, a defenseman, Jonathan Berggren, right wing, Elmer Soderblom as a left wing, and William Lagesson, a defenseman, who re-signed as a UFA with the team. Does this drought end this year? It's not my Motown question for you necessarily, but when you look at this movement, it's very marginal by General Manager Steve Yzerman.
It is marginal. There isn't a lot of big names. But if John Gibson can get to the form that he had with the Anaheim Ducks, where he was their franchise goaltender there for quite a long time, if he can bring that to Detroit, you might see a whole different Detroit Red Wings team. Now, the penalty killing is a real problem. Obviously, they're going to have to fix that. But I would say that this season and how they do is going to revolve around their goaltending and John Gibson. If you look at their adds and drops, I know we haven't gone through them all, but there's an upgrade from Gibson from Mrazek. Tarasenko sort of gets replaced by James Van Riemsdyk, if you want to think about it, on the power play. And Alex Lyon signed in Buffalo. Jeff Petrie leaves. That's a loss, I think, for Detroit, albeit not in the top 3 defensemen, but still a loss for them.
But does Habonic cover that, though?
Yeah, perhaps he does. You're right. Hamonic does come in and cover for the loss of Petrie. So you've got that covered. So I don't see them being a lot better. But if Steve Yzerman and his group think that the reason that they didn't make it was ultimately goaltending, well, you might have found the right piece you need. Remember one thing, everybody that's listening. Pat Verbeek and Steve Yzerman are best of friends. They worked together for a long time. I don't think either one would hose the other guy. Mm-hmm. So I think that probably Pat Verbeek thought it was time for Gibson to get a change of atmosphere. And he called Stevie and said, I'll trade you Gibson, because I would think that they're in different conferences. It's not going to hurt them. So we'll take a look and see when we get to the Pacific Division what Anaheim's got.
The club is listed as number 5 in terms of top prospect pools in the NHL. Players to look at that may crack the lineup this year: Carter Mazur, bottom 6 forward; Nate Danielson, possible second-line center; and Sebastian Cossa, who's a goaltender who played 1 game last season. But let's now look at their offense. Lucas Raymond, 80 points last year, terrific season. Alex DeBrincat, 39 goals. Dylan Larkin, 30 goals, 40 assists, 70 points. And God, I think so many people are wanting to pull for him to get in the playoffs finally. And Patrick Kane had 21 goals. But as we've seen, the movements have been marginal, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of room for error with the offense, that if one of their key guys goes down, it could be 10 years since making the playoffs last.
Well, absolutely. They're on the bubble. There's no doubt about it. And as we just finished saying with Montreal and Ottawa, it doesn't get any easier. When you've got some teams, and we're going to get to Boston in a minute, but when you've got some teams, Buffalo's going to be fighting again to get in there after their 14-year drought. It's not going to get any easier. And the biggest thing is you've got a team like the Rangers and the Bruins, who in those big cities, original 6 markets, that's a disaster when you miss the playoffs. So it's going to be hard. And Detroit didn't make a lot of big moves, but they made a really important move by getting Gibson.
The Buffalo Sabres, 14 consecutive seasons missing the playoffs. Last time they were in was in 2011. They did have the 10th ranked offense last year at 3.23 goals per game, but that defense, goals against per game, 3.50, tied for 29th. And during the course of the offseason, they had to send away a real promising forward in J.J. Peterka. He is traded to Utah in exchange for right wing Josh Doan and defenseman Michael Kesselring. The club also added Connor Timmins, a defenseman, along with prospect defenseman Isaac Beliveau, in exchange for Connor Clifton. Alex Lyon, as you just mentioned, comes on as a free agent from Detroit. Justin Danforth, right wing, comes in from Columbus. And Zach Jones signed as a UFA from the Rangers after not receiving a qualifying offer. So we look at their ads and also the RFAs that they were able to re-sign: Jack Quinn, Ryan Johnson, Tyson Kozak, Ryan McLeod, 4 years at $5 million AAV. Bowen Byram, 2 years, 6.25. Voids arbitration. That was a team-initiated call for arbitration, but they got that deal done before the hearing took place. And they also re-signed goaltender Devin Levi. So, Neil, when we look at the collection of the parts here, and this is a club that I believe we've seen a lot of expectations over the last few seasons. A couple of years they've gotten off well and they've petered out. In other seasons, they just starting off poorly and have gotten so far behind the 8 ball that they've had no shot to make the playoffs. Lindy Ruff, in his second season, in his second stint with Buffalo, where does this get turned around here? Because, like we mentioned before, Montreal, Ottawa managed to crack the playoffs last year. You got Detroit sitting there. Of course, you got the Rangers, you got the Islanders, you've got the Blue Jackets, you got the Bruins. And here are the Sabres that are literally starting in the same spot. Where do they make the difference that they're the one this time?
I don't think they're going to be. By the looks of it, in getting Doan and Kesselring from Utah for a gifted offensive player like Paterka, they're trying to be harder to play against than they were last year. Maybe that is what's in the coach and the manager's minds, is they want to be harder to play against. But I don't see that they've improved over the offseason. I just don't. I don't understand the Paterka deal. I don't understand why you'd trade him. I think it's a great deal for Utah. But again, I don't see them having improved enough to displace all the other teams that we've just mentioned.
A couple of prospects to look for with the Sabres this year: Anton Wahlberg and Konsta Helenius. But now I want to switch over to their defense for a second, because there's Captain Rasmus Dahlin, Bowen Byram, Owen Power, first overall pick, Kesselring joins, Jones joins, Timmins joins, and Beliveau as a prospect. And when you've got the likes of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in goal, this is a team that is not built badly from goal out.
No, they're not. Certainly their defense, with 2 first overalls back there in Power and Dahlin. Dahlin, a tremendously gifted offensive defenseman, as we know. But they're going to have to get their goaltending to stand up really well. And we'll see. I mean, they have revamped their defense, as you just said. I mean, they've added some pieces there. They look like on paper it should be pretty good. But again, I just don't see the improvement that would be enough to push this team into the playoffs.
If we're here saying that, it's going to be 15 years when we do the summer coolers next year. The Boston Bruins. For the first time since 2016, they missed the playoffs in 2024-25. They have fallen a long way since their record-setting season in 2022-23. 8th last year, 15th in the East, 28th overall in the NHL with only 76 points. And from where I'm sitting, Neil, I looked at the additions for this season, and this feels like it is going to be a year of David Pastrnak against the world, because obviously Marchand left, Bergeron and Krejci before that. This is a shadow of the club that it was 3 years ago. And I'm going to go through the additions here, and you tell me if you see any game breaker acquired by general manager Don Sweeney. Victor Soderstrom, acquired in a trade with Chicago. Victor Arvidsson, trade with Edmonton. Tanner Jeannot, signed as a UFA from the Kings. Mikey Esamont, tough guy, grindy type player, signed as a UFA from Seattle. Alex Steeves, signed as a UFA Group 6 from Toronto. Jordan Harris, signed as a UFA that wasn't qualified by the Blue Jackets. And Sean Corrali, coming back in as a UFA from Columbus. This will be his second stint with the Bruins. So anything jump off the page there?
Only that Tanner Jeannot is a very rich guy for what he can bring to the table. His contract is very, very good for his level of play. The only name that sort of jumps off the page to me unbelievably, is Jordan Harris, who got signed from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Jordan Harris was who Columbus got for trading Patrik Laine to Montreal. So now they got nothing for Patrik Laine in Columbus. Not that Jordan Harris was anything more than a name to get in that trade when Don Waddell moved Patrik Laine over to the Habs.
And there's really not a lot in terms of the RFA, UFA re-signs. The most significant is Morgan Geekie, who had his second consecutive career year with the Bruins. So if he's going to be the offensive force right behind David Pastrnak, and maybe you've put in Pavel Zacha behind that, this is pretty lean because of the players that they re-signed. Defenseman Mason Lohrei, defenseman Henry Jokiharju, center John Beecher, left wing Riley Tufte, who re-signed as the UFA because didn't get signed anywhere else. So I'm at a loss here at where I could see any sort of improvement for this club. So the Beantown question for you is, yes, I think James Hagans, who was picked 7th overall center out of BC, has a great chance to crack this lineup. But the reality is, for first-year head coach Marco Sturm, who succeeded Joe Sacco, if this team is going to have any success, you're going to need a bounce-back season from Jeremy Swayman, and they're going to have to win low-scoring games. This has to be a defense-first club, period.
I don't see Boston Bruins getting back into the playoff picture with the first-year coach Marco Sturm. Not that that's anything against Marco Sturm. I hear all good things about him, and he certainly knows his way around the NHL. But I don't see the quality and the depth in this lineup that you need to make the playoffs, and I just don't see the Boston Bruins getting back into it. And, you know, I just want to make one comment, Vic. A year ago, Jim Montgomery was the coach of the Boston Bruins. They got off to a poor start, and they fired Jim Montgomery, who got immediately hired by the St. Louis Blues, who were off to a slow start. And Jim Montgomery retooled the St. Louis Blues into the playoffs last year, and the Boston Bruins kept falling and falling and falling. So there's a lot to be upset about if you're a Bruins fan and you're waiting for this season to start and you want to see if they're going to be better. But I don't see it with the names we've been going over.
I think you and I try to be completely objective with every team that we look at. And from early in the summer, when we saw their moves starting to unfold, we were like, we're kind of waiting for something to happen that never did.
What I'm seeing on paper, they want to be a tough team, right? They want to make it really hard on you to play in Boston. Mm-hmm. And that's why they picked up guys like Tanner Jeannot. And as you commented about Isamont, he's hard to play against. And they've already got some guys there that are hard to play against and that are tough. But that's not going to win you games. I mean, you can make it hard on the opposition to play in Boston, but you've also got to put pucks in their net. And I don't see it, other than, of course, star player David Pastrnak, but he can't do it all by himself. And who's their captain going to be, by the way? That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And I think also they need a good bounce back year from Charlie McAvoy as well.
They do. They do. He's suffered through a number of injuries. He's a real quality offensive defenseman and defensive defenseman as well. And they do need a bounce back year from him.
And I think we should also mention Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, who I think a lot of people were looking at to being maybe the second coming of Zdeno Chara. I mean, certainly those are huge shoes to fill, but I certainly think that we expected more from him last year. And I think those three defensemen need to make a big mark this year to help this Bruins team start to grow out of the hole that they've dug themselves into last year.
Yeah, they do have to start to grow. And those Lindholm and Zadorov are going to have much better seasons next year than they had in their first season with the Bruins.
That will wrap up the Atlantic Division Summer Cooler for 2025. A lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun, and it's great to go through these teams. And hopefully our listeners and viewers on YouTube will have gotten something out of it and learned something from it. Just want to thank Lugaroo again for these great shirts, for their sponsorship. Give them a try. Try to support the sponsor, lugaroo.co. That's LOOGAROO.co. And they're great clothing. I mean, I wear them all the time, and that's not me just trying to say something nice. I do. I honestly do. So give them a shot.
You wouldn't wear anything unless it's comfortable.
No, absolutely.
Thanks to our listeners. Send questions or comments to nhlwraparound@gmail.com. Remember that all of our podcasts are on all platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and our complete catalog can be found on our website, which will be relaunching by the end of the month, nhlwraparound.com. Please continue to get the word out on our show as our subscriber base continues to grow. And remember that we will be back with the Metropolitan Division dropping on Friday, August 22nd, the Central on Monday, August 25th, and we wrap up with the Pacific on Wednesday, August the 27th. And all 32 teams will also be released as shorts on YouTube once the divisions are all completed. So once again, on behalf of Neil, I'm Vic, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.